I think what AI is going to do is going to automate and replace a lot of redundant work that people do, right? It's not going to replace, for us to replace a whole human being, I think we're underestimating how great of work that the average human can do and all the dynamic things
Right.
it can do. But there are redundant tasks.
You're listening to the Spotlight edition of The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Louis Prosperi. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm Louis Prosperi. Our guest is the VP of Sales at Hub Analytics, Tommy Vincent. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here. Appreciate you guys having us on.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this interview because you're bringing something very unique to our industry, and I can't wait to start talking about it. But before we start, let's get to know a little bit about Tommy's. Tell me about your career and how you ended up at Hub Analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, I would call it primarily technology. That's where I kind of cut my teeth in the industry, and it was different technologies over the course of a couple of decades. Most of my experience is at the intersection of entrepreneurship, technology, and accounting, as it turns out. But I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, and I had the benefit early on in my career to get exposed to some pretty sizable technology exits, venture capital funded businesses. We sold one of them early in my career to Microsoft for a little over $1 billion back in 2011. And that kind of took me off into a direction. It was quite fun. But as things evolved, I became more involved in the entrepreneurship side and looking to help small businesses. That's in fact where my dad was an entrepreneur, my grandpa was an entrepreneur. So I started to kind of lean more into the earlier sides of businesses versus being funded by $50 million or hundreds of dollars. So, and that's where I found my comfortable place, and I really enjoy this intersection of technology, entrepreneurship, and now accounting. But yeah, I got to Hub Analytics through just partners, essentially. I'm always talking to people, networking, staying in touch, and a couple of my partners had an incredible idea, what is now Hub Analytics, and we got to talking years ago, and I just saw the writing on the wall, and I thought, yeah, this is where I want to go next. And their background is more on the accounting side, mine was on the technology side, so we put those together, and here we are. So,
well, technically. So, well, the reality is, to be quite honest, accounting and technology are people don't realize, or bookkeeping, technology is almost an integral part of what we do now. And technically, we can't do what we do without technology anymore in our industry. So that's a good mix. I think getting the expertise on the bookkeeping and accounting side and getting your background, I think that's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the future of bookkeeping, which is a huge topic. But let's really focus on the technology changing. And you know where I'm going with this question, right? Where is the industry's technology going? What are the key things that you see or Hub Analytics sees right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good question. I think that you said it already, Louis, which is technology and accounting are what I would consider sometimes a match made in heaven. And the reason we say that is just because, there is technically a very right way to do accounting and there's a wrong way. It actually is very black and white, although it feels really gray for a lot of people. But that's a match made in heaven for technology, and that's where technology tends to thrive, is with black and white, right? Ones and zeros, things are binary. And so I agree. Look, if you were to take something like Microsoft Excel away from the accounting industry, it would be like we'd all be lost in space. Now, we're evolving beyond that. So we can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I do think the two are kind of a match made in heaven. You can't really separate them out these days and be efficient.
Yeah, before we go on that, just let everybody know we are not taking your Excel away from you. This is to enhance it. Tommy's not going to scare anybody here, but continue. I just wanted to make because Excel is the lifeblood. Just to be honest with you.
Good disclaimer. Everyone, calm down. No. But yeah, and look, it is evolving. I think things are getting better. The way I like to frame it up, in all fairness, is that it's definitely not just accounting, right? And the big hot topic today is AI, but AI, where we see it impacting industries in general, is really in the professional services industries. This is where AI is going to have its day. And in accounting and bookkeeping is a big part of professional services. And so we do see that it's, a lot of the solutions we're seeing today are helping people become quicker, faster, more efficient, and be able to do essentially more with less. And it really is AI that's going to be driving a lot of the change for, I think, accounting in particular and bookkeeping over the next decade and beyond. So,
yeah, let's talk about technology shifts. When we talk about computer, then we talk about spreadsheets, and then we talk about software integration, and then automation but AI is different, right? The ability for AI to normally things would take 5-10 years. Do you think how AI is coming into our industry? Do you think the time window is much shorter than it has been with other technologies coming into the industry? Like, are we going to have 5 or 6 years or 10 years to get used to it? Or are we going to have like 2 or 3 years and we should probably start working on it now? I guess that's my question to you.
That's a great question, actually. So there's a principle in technology. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, Louis, but it's called Moore's Law, right? And Moore's Law is basically the law that every 2 years, technology reduces in size, like say the microchip reduces in size by about 50% over a 2-year period, but it double the punch. And so basically, if you were to trace that curve, technology and the innovation itself is escalating on a rapid scale. And then you get to something called singularity, and we're not going to go there.
Yeah.
What it is that the advancements are coming faster and faster. And the thing is you don't have to look at just accounting or business. I think a lot of people kind of in general in life right now feel a little bit overwhelmed by how much tech is coming at you on a daily basis, whether it be getting your news on your phone and your desktop and your device and your Kindle and your Fire. It's like, oh my God. So there's a lot coming at us these days for sure.
So what you're saying is that this law here, basically, we're at a exponential rate of change now, and for us bookkeepers and accountants, we don't like change. Just to let you know, that's not our genetics. We got used to it. I get it, but let's dive a little bit more into it, because the part that really I would love to know about is as automation and artificial intelligence or machine learning gets into it, how do you see that changing the professional bookkeeper's role from, like, tell me a little bit about what you see from that perspective in their role, because technology does change our job descriptions over time, right? When you compare, we used to be on ledger sheets and on paper and doing all that. We don't do that anymore. So give us a little insight on how that role may change over the next 2, 3, 5 years.
Yeah, well, I think, the thing to look at, and especially as it relates back to AI, is that I think that there's a lot of fear out there that AI is going to replace bookkeepers, or lots of professionals for that matter. And, our take, and my take is simply that that's not exactly true. I think what AI is going to do is going to automate and replace a lot of redundant work that people do. Right? It's not going to for us to replace a whole human being. I think we're underestimating how great of work that the average human can do and all the dynamic things we can do. But there are redundant tasks. And, I would say 5-10 years ago, those redundant tasks actually could be automated, but it was hard, right? And that's kind of the evolution with technology, is that when we break through, that initial iteration of the new breakthrough, it's great, but it's hard. It's like the deep tech people are the ones who are going to be able to do this. And that was 5-10 years ago. I think with AI now, a lot of the automations that we can do in bookkeeping are going to be accessible and doable by your average accounting firm, your average bookkeeping firm, your average bookkeeper. And so a lot of the technology that we're seeing today is exactly that. I would actually consider it more of like a second or a third iteration of something that was possible by the big tech companies 5+ years ago. It's just now coming to the masses a little bit more. And that's how I see bookkeeping changing for folks, is that I think we are reaching a point where, for people in the profession, you're probably going to have to lean in perhaps a little bit more than you have in the past, right? And I do, one of the things I'll say too is that I like accounting because you do have to be cautious. If you're in, say, not to pick on anybody, but if you're in digital marketing, everyone's rushing to the fastest tech at all times and pumping out articles and this and that. And, but with accounting, you have to be a little bit more cautious. You're not going to dive
Yeah.
into the latest technology. And I like that. Now, with that said, we have reached a place where bookkeeping firms and solopreneurs are going to have to start leaning into the AI technology in order to keep pace with what's going on. Because if you're not today, then you'll be at a disadvantage tomorrow, without a doubt.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is, which is actually a very positive thing, is the old days we needed a bit of a software programming knowledge base to actually utilize the technology for automation, or have someone on staff that could program and do stuff.
Yep.
But when you're saying AI is allowing us to be intuitive, where we say we need certain things and we don't have to have that background, so it allows us to automate at a level that, or the entrance level is lower now with regards to automation. You don't have to have a huge back team. So for like the single entrepreneur bookkeeper or accountant, I call them the one person show, or the 2 or 3 staff. Now you have access to things that only, what you're saying, larger firms had. Is that correct? Is that
Absolutely. In fact, I actually feel like AI is actually going to level the playing field for smaller firms
right?
more than ever before. And that's an incredible thing. I think there's an amazing opportunity in front of us for solopreneurs and the likes.
Well, that's actually great news. I mean, because people think about, well, Terminator and all these other fun movies that are out there talk about when you say AI, you immediately think of doom and destruction and replacement, right? And that's what you think about. But what you're bringing up is a completely different thing. You're saying that it allows us now. We don't need a huge. So it actually benefits the smaller guy at a higher exponential benefit compared to the larger firm who already kind of had access to it. Is that what you're saying, more or less?
Absolutely, right? I mean, look, take computers as an example, right? Go back to 1975.
Sure.
A computer was the size of a warehouse, and you had like 10 people running it and whatnot. But that computer was still valuable. It was valuable to IBM. It was valuable to those companies.
Sure.
Fast forward 30 years, everyone's got a PC and they're able to pump out spreadsheets or Word documents or whatever it might be. And it's the same thing with all technology, right? I mean, mobile phones. So I think AI is just that. It's bringing a lot of power and usability to your average professional, really, in person.
Well, that's fantastic. So here we are, folks. Tommy's telling you, don't be afraid, embrace, because it's going to level the playing field. I like that a lot. Here's another thing that I think, and getting to know your product, Hub Analytics, a little bit, which I wasn't familiar with these things, was the ability for the bookkeeper, when we have a bookkeeping firm, the transactional level, right? When we have our staff or people doing it, it's hard to go in and analyze all the transactions to make sure that they're doing properly. We have some checks and balances, but at the end of the day, unless we go back and recheck it, and I think what you've indicated, and I think Hub Analytics, I don't have a problem you telling a little bit about Hub Analytics, but I think you have the ability now to take a look at a company's transactional level, and have AI for the bookkeeper to spot issues or landmines or things that they need to make the customer aware, is also for them to also be able to fix earlier rather than at the very back end. And they go, oh, something's wrong here and I got to go back. Talk a little bit about that, because to me, that's a game changer that we have access to that, or we should have access to that soon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's great, Louis. And this isn't about, this isn't about us. It's not about Hub Analytics, but I think you bring up a great point. We do offer a solution for that. But more importantly, I think that um, it gets straight at the point about how is bookkeeping going to change. We can talk about some of those details, right? But to understand it, the way we look at it, at least, is we're looking at it from like this kind of like a manufacturing process of a month end reporting, right? And it's like, okay, well, what goes into that, right? We all have our clients and they're on whatever they're on, QuickBooks or Zero or whatever it is. But there's a process, right? And that process, we looked at it when we analyzed it and said, okay, it starts with data entry, right? And in data entry, I think it's oftentimes overlooked where without good data entry and and proper accuracy, then everything else is, you know,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
it's garbage
No,
in,
you're right.
out, as we know. And so that's like the first part of the manufacturing process of accounting, right? And so you get the bookkeeping work. But then when you're kind of finished with that initial bookkeeping, there's kind of an additional step to that, which is verifying the accuracy of that. And I think a lot of solopreneurs who are listening today can probably resonate with that, where they might have 2 or 3 bookkeepers on staff, junior folks, and they've got to double
Right.
check those books before they're going to go to move to that next step. And that can be pretty time consuming. You're reviewing the statements and the reconciliations and everything else that comes with it. Now, to take it a step further, let's say you feel good about the data accuracy in your process. Well, oftentimes, maybe your process ends there, but if you're an advisory firm, maybe you want to pump out a month-end report with a couple of KPIs that client wants to see. Maybe you want to add a couple of 2 cents so that you have your strategic insights in there. Those are all parts of that process, right? It flows
Right.
literally. And that's what we looked at. And that's what I look at as it relates to AI. So going back to your question, Louis, about that front end of the process, that's where we started. And we said, okay, well, we're not going to automate the bookkeeping work. We think that there's still a role for humans there. There's also quite a few technologies out there that can automate some of the bookkeeping. But we picked it up right from there. We said, okay, well, when the bookkeeping is done, how long does it take your average solopreneur bookkeeper to review and verify the accuracy of that data input? And we did a lot of interviews and talked to a lot of folks, and we had our own experience in the industry. And it was obviously hours per client, maybe an hour,
Yes.
maybe 2 hours per client per end of month. And it adds up. So for us, and again, this isn't about Hub Analytics, but we created a proprietary inspection engine that spans all the categories of accounting with 150 points. And so when you click a data diagnostic report, we run it in about 5 seconds to track everything that looks irregular in the accounting, so that bookkeeper can say, hey, I noticed a few flags here. Go back to the junior bookkeeper and say, hey, look, let's make these edits. And you're done with that process in about 10 seconds versus an hour or 2 per client. So that was one of the first things we really wanted to do for the industry is really improve that process.
To me, that process is huge, because you're absolutely right. One of the things that comes in is we do have automations. We have other programs that come in and take the data and put it right into the software.
Yeah.
Right. So we know sometimes, particularly high volume stuff, we don't the junior, the senior bookkeeper isn't doing the data entry anymore. Right.
Right.
They're at the reconciliation level, and anything that allows them to take a look at that through like you said, like an AI thing that flags, so that they could see a problem,
Mhm.
or at least flag an issue, is a game changer. Because the 1 or 2 hours that you're talking about, that's if everything goes well. Right? As soon as there's a flag on the play, that 1 or 2 hours changes dramatically. I'm just letting you know. So when they're telling you 1 or 2 hours, I think that's just when, oh, everything worked out well, now we can go on.
Oh
It
yeah.
has nothing to do about the issues, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's been some conversation we're thinking maybe, maybe it's a little bit more than that, but your average person's not going to say, yeah, it takes us hours, to do
Yeah,
it. But
yeah.
absolutely.
But then they could focus that time on the flags rather than trying to figure out if there are any flags. And that's a huge benefit.
Well, it is. Look, here's where the rubber meets the road, in our opinion. Is say again, let's talk about a solopreneur, maybe somebody who has 2 to 3 bookkeepers on staff.
Right.
A lot of their time is spent double checking that work. That's time away from being able to spend on their business. Now, if you can accelerate that process, and that's a core function of most bookkeepers we work with. If you're able to accelerate that down to, a couple of seconds to run that report, maybe you got time to hire another bookkeeper. Maybe you got time to hire two more bookkeepers, and you're able to start scaling up your business on the same allotment of time that you were dedicating to your business beforehand. That's a big deal. That's a game changer because you can basically lift the top line of your business and keep the overhead, you know, stable.
So that goes right into the one of the questions I have for you, which was leveraging technology to be successful. I think you kind of answered that, but let's talk a little bit about leveraging technology. So how can a bookkeeper, and this makes sense because uh, for the independent bookkeeper or accountant who has one or two staff members, they need as many levers as leveraging as possible because it's they're at their, an extra person is like a 30-40% increase in cost, right? When
Yep.
you're talking three people, you're adding number four, that's 25% increase in your direct cost compared if you have 100 people and you're adding one or two, right? So talk a little bit about the leveraging aspects of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it comes down to anytime you're in professional services, and bookkeeping is a good example, it comes down to capacity, right? So,
Right.
say you've got a few folks on staff, what's their capacity? How many clients can you get, each one of those bookkeepers to handle, let's say, in a given end of month period? Who knows what it is? Call it 5, call it 10, right? Just depending on the scope
Sure.
of work. But that's a limitation, right? You bump up against a limitation. Say they're all maxed out, you got to hire a fourth one if you want to grow your business. Now, if you're able to leverage technology like ours or plenty others out there, you have this ability to change the capacity, right? Now, let's say you're able to, say you use something like a bot keeper or whatever to automate bookkeeping work. Well, maybe that one bookkeeper then can handle 20 accounts.
Right.
You just doubled the size of your capacity without having to do anything else. You didn't have to hire anybody else. So that's where that overhead stays stable. And then your top line is going up quite a bit. Now, on a general basis, though, Louis, I would say, you know, the thing I think the thing that's really going to separate people over the next 5 years is really leaning in on the technology. I was reading a good book. I'll give you an example. I was reading a good book the other day that I think probably a lot of people are familiar with called Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's a few years
Okay.
old now. But in that book, he was saying something similar, which was basically that, the people who are going to succeed the most are the ones who are going to know how to use the advanced tools. And so the way I see bookkeepers' roles changing in a big way is becoming very good at these tools. And this doesn't have to make you an IT person, right? These tools are ready made for your average professional who's not tech savvy to be able to use, but you still got to learn the platforms. You got to know how to click a few of the features and this and that. But if you can get really good at that and those things, no matter what technology you choose, you're going to have a major leg up, right? It becomes more of a technology orchestration role than it does a bookkeeping role.
That's interesting because our profession used to be in that area where we didn't have to go as fast as the technology. We could sit and watch and change at our leisure. And you just hit it on the head right now. The curve of the ever changing environment. We don't have that luxury anymore. So the leveraging of technology is critical for us. And I'm going to just add a little point to that. If not even not leveraging technology actually puts you in a negative position. You won't be able to keep up. Does that make sense now? It used to be an advantage. It's just what you need to stay current. Is that a good analogy going forward?
Yeah, look, I say something similar all the time. I don't think we're quite where you're saying yet, I will say, but what I tell people, and it's a little bit of a line, but I think it rings true, which is today, if you're adopting technology in the accounting space, you're at an advantage. I believe it's still a competitive advantage. From what I'm seeing in the marketplace, we are slow to change. This industry is slow to change. It is what it is, and that's okay. But if you're able
Right.
to do it, you truly are at a competitive advantage.
Oh,
Question
good.
is how long
Okay.
that lasts. And the way I like to say it is today it's competitive advantage. Tomorrow, it's truly table stakes. And next week, you're behind. right? And, I don't know that exact timeline for us. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 3, 4, but there's a window of opportunity right now. And if you're embracing the change and can embrace a little bit of easy to use technology to help run your practice, I think you're at a big advantage, which I think is exciting.
And that's interesting, Tommy, because you're absolutely right. The window of change was much longer, right? So I think that's the other thing is you're absolutely right. If you embrace technology properly and effectively, you're ahead of the game. But how long is that window? That's a good question. I don't know either, to be quite honest. So, but that's actually true, and you're right. I think it's a good thing for us accountants and bookkeepers to slow down and be slower, because I don't think our customers want us to be the experimenters when it comes to certain things, right? So I think that
No,
makes sense. That makes sense.
absolutely. And that's what I would encourage everyone listening is you don't need to go out and start buying technology or trying it. This just doesn't need to be frantic, especially in our profession. It's just
Right.
not productive. But I do think there's, if you can find a moment to reflect, I know bookkeeping is kind of like we're running around with our hair on fire, but if you can have a moment to reflect and maybe review a couple of well documented tools, I think it would behoove people who are in that position to do so. Absolutely.
So, Tommy, let's talk a little bit. I know you don't want to talk about your company, but I'd like to talk a little bit about how Hub Analytics has taken everything we've discussed in theory and now is actually trying to apply it for the bookkeepers so that they can actually not just stay up, but thrive and be in that advantage window that we were just talking about. If you can go a little bit about, we just talked a little bit about the transactional part, but there's more that's available. Is that correct? If you don't mind just
Yeah.
going a little bit into that.
No, absolutely. Look, I think, I'll start by saying that there's more opportunity here than first meets the eye. It's not simply just about efficiency, which is a lot of what we've talked about. The bigger opportunity, in my humble opinion, for bookkeepers is this ability to pivot and to evolve into more of an advisory firm. Right now, that's a hard pivot to do 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Perhaps you don't have the proper tools and education or whatever it might be. But new technology like ours, Hub Analytics, is allowing people to automate the client deliverables. And that's the space we play in. So we are CRP, which is a client reporting platform.
Okay.
And what we talked about earlier, Louis, was, hey, on the front end of this manufacturing process of accounting is we got to double check and verify the quality of the data.
Right.
But further down the line, which I mentioned briefly and I'll go into now is, well, what do we do now? Do we just send them the QuickBooks balance sheet? Okay, great. But these days, kind of everyone can do that. How do you separate yourself? And also, perhaps, how do you make that leap to being an advisor versus just a bookkeeper? And Hub Analytics is really enabling people and working as a catalyst to do that. So the other things we automate is your client deliverables. So our program looks at all of the financial data for your customers, and you have a full single pane of glass with all your customers on it. And you can go into each customer and hit generate financial package with the click of a button. And what it generates is a customized document that you helped configure that is professionally designed and institutional grade that you can hand your customers. And the beauty is that in our platform, we have woven artificial intelligence into the analysis itself. So every KPI and the executive summary itself has artificial intelligence narration that is CFO quality to it. So your average shop can take this deliverable and hand it over to their clients and say, here's what we charge for. You're no longer looking at $500 to $1,000 a month for that service. You're looking at $2,000 to $5,000 a month for that service. And all the bookkeepers that we work with, they're not trying to work longer, harder hours at the same rate. They'd really like to see their rates go up to more of a fractional CFO kind of rate. And this platform allows them to make that leap quite gracefully.
Well, here's how I see it. That's great on that side, but it also is a huge benefit to the customer because the customer couldn't afford a fractional CFO.
Yep.
because of all the cost related to it. And the professional bookkeeper who could probably provide insight doesn't have the time or energy to produce those reports that you're talking about. Now that the reports are produced, they can actually be in the review. When we talk about advisory, the way I see it, based on what we were talking about here, is now you're able to spend some time with the customer and talk to them about about these reports, rather than spending all your time building the reports. Does that make sense? That's where the value is, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it depends on how you define value, but I can tell you that anecdotally, like so many bookkeepers that we're working with, that's kind of like that hard to measure value, which is like they just enjoy the job a lot more and they're able to spend time with their customers. And actually, that's why they got into it. Most bookkeepers we know, we speak with, and we have they like, they want to help entrepreneurs, right? There's a mission there, but you get caught up in doing the work and you don't get to live it. And this is allowing people to live that mission that they once had a little bit. And it's been pretty awesome to see.
Well, I think you hit it. People think accountants and bookkeepers do their job so they don't talk to people. In fact, we're very people-oriented people. We love talking to people, and we love helping people out. Unfortunately, the technology hasn't ties us down to doing the work. Now we're able to get it automated where we can explain it to our customers, and the feedback's mutual. I think you're absolutely right. Of course, the price value goes up. That makes sense because the value's there.
Yep.
But the added benefit, or the a benefit for the professional, is now that they engage in their customer more longer. They can, instead of spending 3 hours on the write-up, because that's what it takes to do, probably longer, they spend maybe an hour doing it because it's automated, and they get to spend 2 hours with the customer, which changes the dynamic. And I think that's fantastic. Tommy, if people want to find out more about your product and what they can do, where can they go?
Well, you said it. So hub-analytics.com. So the web is king, right? So head over to our website. We got a couple of buttons at the top. Yeah, there's a short video we have just kind of illustrating what the Hub platform can do. There's also another little button there that says, book a demo. So if you click that, one of our team will get back to you, and we're happy to show you something customized for anyone listening.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, Tommy, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, look, my pleasure, Louis. Always fun chatting with you, sir.
Fantastic. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to the Spotlight edition of The Successful Bookkeeper with Louis Prosperi. For more information and to access the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening and have a great week.